In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where alien civilizations boast of their legendary hunters and feared warriors, there exists a truth that would shake the foundations of their pride. The most dangerous predator in known space doesn't roar with the fury of the Krillian deathhounds, doesn't possess the razor claws of the Vorthan assassins, and doesn't command the psychic powers of the dreaded Mind Reapers. She sits quietly in the back of a classroom, taking notes. Her name is Sarah Chen, and she's about to teach the galaxy that humanity's greatest weapon isn't technology, isn't numbers, and isn't even courage. It's something far more terrifying, the relentless, methodical patience of a human who has decided that you need to be stopped. The aliens call their greatest hunters chasers, being so skilled in pursuit that they can track prey across star systems, through dimensional rifts, and beyond the edges of known space. They have academies, tournaments, and legends spanning millennia. What they don't know is that they've been teaching their techniques to the one species that doesn't just hunt for sport, for honor, or for survival. Humans hunt for justice. And, when Sarah Chen finally stands up from her desk, closes her notebook, and walks out of that classroom, the galaxy's most wanted criminal will learn what it truly means to be hunted by Earth's apex predator. The chase is about to begin. The lecture hall on Nexus Prime buzzed with the low hum of 100 different alien species attempting to maintain respectful silence. Professor Vexthera, a towering Krillian with obsidian scales and eyes like molten gold, paced before the massive holographic display showing the tracking patterns of famous chasers throughout galactic history. The art of pursuit, Professor Vexthera's voice resonated through the chamber, each word carefully enunciated in perfect galactic standard, is not merely about speed or endurance. It is about understanding your prey better than they understand themselves. Sarah Chen sat in the back row, exactly where she had positioned herself for the past 3 standard years. Row 47, seat 12. Not because she was antisocial or trying to hide, but because it offered the optimal view of all entry and exit points, clear sight lines to the instructor, and minimal blind spots. Her fellow students, a diverse collection of beings from across the galaxy's most respected hunting cultures, barely acknowledged her presence. To them, she was just another soft-skinned human, probably here on some cultural exchange program. Earth was still considered a backwater world by most galactic standards, despite their recent inclusion in the Galactic Hunting Academy. The humans had been granted exactly 50 slots per cycle, a token gesture of inclusivity that most alien species viewed as charitable rather than competitive. Sarah's notebook lay open before her, filled with precise handwriting in multiple languages and detailed diagrams. While other students recorded lectures digitally or relied on memory implants, she preferred the tactile experience of pen on paper. Her classmates found this primitive, but Sarah understood something they didn't: the act of writing engaged different neural pathways, creating deeper, more accessible memories. "Can anyone tell me," Professor Vexthera continued, his claws clicking against the podium, "what separates a successful chaser from a mere tracker?" A dozen appendages shot into the air. ZYX Mora, a crystalline being from the Helix Nebula, chimed her response in harmonic frequencies. "Superior sensory apparatus and quantum-enhanced reflexes, Professor." Partially correct. The professor's tail swished, indicating mild approval. "Torgon?" The massive, fur-covered Brutalian in the front row growled his answer. "Raw power and intimidation. Fear makes prey stupid." Also partially correct. Anyone else? Sarah's hand remained on her paper, but she didn't raise it. She never did. In 3 years, she had never volunteered an answer, never asked a question during lectures, and never participated in the Academy's numerous competitions and exhibitions. The professors had long since written her off as a mediocre student coasting through the program. They were wrong. The answer, Professor Vexthera announced when no other hands appeared, is psychological understanding. A true chaser doesn't just follow tracks or rely on superior physical capabilities. They become their target. They think as their target thinks, predict their target's moves before the target makes them, and, ultimately, they become inevitable. Sarah wrote this down, though she had already filled 17 notebooks with similar observations. She had been studying not just the official curriculum, but the gaps between the lessons, the assumptions the instructors made, and the blind spots in their methodologies. The Galactic Hunting Academy was renowned throughout known space. Founded over 2 millennia ago by the Krillian Empire, it had evolved into an interspecies institution where the galaxy's most promising predators learned to become professional chasers. Governments hired academy graduates to track down dangerous criminals, corporations employed them to recover stolen assets, and private citizens retained them to find missing persons across the vast reaches of space. The Academy's reputation was built on results. In 2,000 years, only 12 Academy-trained chasers had ever failed to complete their contracts. It was a success rate that bordered on the miraculous, considering the complexity and danger of interstellar pursuit. What made this record even more impressive was the caliber of prey these chasers typically hunted. The galaxy's most wanted criminals weren't common thieves or simple murderers. They were beings who had mastered dimensional manipulation, time distortion, genetic shapeshifting, and technologies that could make them effectively invisible to conventional tracking methods. Yet Academy chasers found them. Now, Professor Vexthera activated a new holographic display. Let's examine the case of Mordux the Shadowless, pursued by chaser Valkyrie across 14 star systems and through the Dark Nebula itself. The hologram showed a spindly, wraith-like creature with the ability to phase between dimensions. The pursuit had lasted 18 standard months and had become legendary throughout the galaxy. Sarah had studied this case extensively, not through the Academy's official materials, but through her own research into court records, witness testimonies, and sensor logs. She had identified 43 points where the official Academy narrative didn't match the evidence. As Professor Vexthera walked the class through Valkyrie's methodical pursuit, Sarah made additional notes in the margins of her notebook. The other students absorbed the lesson as intended, learning about persistence, adaptability, and the importance of multi-dimensional thinking in tracking elusive prey. Sarah was learning something else entirely. She was learning the Academy's blind spots. After the lecture, students filed out in their usual clusters. The Krillians moved in a disciplined formation, their military background evident in every synchronized step. The helix crystalline beings harmonized together as they walked, creating beautiful, complex musical patterns. The Brutalians simply charged forward, shouldering aside anyone who moved too slowly. Sarah gathered her materials methodically and joined the flow of students, but she didn't head toward the dormitories like most of her classmates. Instead, she made her way to the Academy's vast library complex. The library was one of the most impressive structures on Nexus Prime, a planet that had been specifically terraformed to house the Academy. Rising 3 kilometers into the sky and extending even deeper underground, it contained the accumulated hunting knowledge of every species in the galactic collective. Physical books, holographic records, quantum storage matrices, and even psychic impressions from telepathic species were all available to students. Most students used the library for specific research assignments or to access entertainment during their free time. Sarah used it differently. She had been systematically reading everything. Not just the hunting manuals and tracking guides, but the historical records, the cultural anthropology texts, the psychological profiles of every major criminal case from the past 5 centuries. She studied the mythology and folklore of predator species, analyzed the neurological differences between hunters and prey animals across the galaxy, and memorized the political and economic factors that drove most criminal behavior. Her fellow students thought she was obsessed with academic achievement. Her instructors assumed she was struggling with the practical applications of the curriculum. Neither group understood what Sarah was actually doing. She was building a comprehensive map of how the galaxy's best hunters thought, moved, and operated. More importantly, she was identifying their limitations. Tonight, like every night for the past 3 years, Sarah made her way to Archive Level 7, Subsection Gamma. This was where the Academy stored its oldest records, the cases that predated modern galactic civilization. Few students ever ventured this deep into the archives, and fewer still had the language skills necessary to parse the ancient texts. Sarah had taught herself 47 extinct languages in her first year. She settled into her usual reading alcove and activated a small, personal illumination field. The text she was examining tonight was written in Old Krillian, a ceremonial script that had fallen out of use over 800 years ago. It detailed the hunting practices of the legendary chaser Morthak, who had supposedly possessed supernatural tracking abilities. As Sarah worked through the archaic grammar and cultural references, she began to recognize patterns. Morthak's supernatural abilities weren't magical at all. They were the result of incredibly detailed preparation and psychological profiling. He had developed techniques for predicting behavior that were centuries ahead of their time, methods that modern chasers had forgotten in their reliance on advanced technology. But there was something else in the text, something that made Sarah pause and reread several passages carefully. Morthak had failed. Not officially. The Academy records listed him as having a perfect completion rate across 47 contracts. But this personal journal, written in a script most modern scholars couldn't read, told a different story. Contract number 38 had involved tracking a shape-shifting criminal across the frontier territories. Morthak had followed every procedure perfectly, applied every technique flawlessly, and maintained pursuit for over 2 years. The criminal had eventually been found dead, apparently having died in an accident while fleeing. But Morthak's private writings revealed the truth. The criminal had outsmarted him, faked his own death, and escaped. Morthak had known this but had never reported it, allowing the Academy to record it as a successful completion. It was a small lie, buried in ancient text, but it confirmed something Sarah had been suspecting for months. The Academy's perfect record was an illusion. She spent the rest of the night cross-referencing Morthak's journal with other ancient sources, building a database of discrepancies between official Academy history and the reality recorded in personal accounts, witness testimonies, and archaeological evidence. By dawn, she had identified 17 additional cases where Academy chasers had likely failed but had covered up their failures to maintain the institution's reputation. Sarah closed the ancient text and made her way back to the dormitories as the first light of Nexus Prime's twin suns began to illuminate the Academy grounds. She passed early rising students heading to physical training sessions and simulation exercises, all of them preparing for the practical challenges of their chosen profession. None of them suspected that the quiet human girl they barely noticed had just spent another night developing the most comprehensive understanding of chaser psychology and methodology in Academy history. As she reached her dormitory room, Sarah's personal communicator chimed with an incoming message. She activated the privacy screen and opened the transmission, expecting routine Academy announcements or messages from her family on Earth. Instead, she found herself looking at the weathered face of Admiral Harrison Webb, Director of Earth's Interstellar Security Division. "Miss Chen," the Admiral's voice was grave, "we have a situation. Please report to the Secure Communication Facility immediately. Use authorization code Theta-77 Alpha." The transmission ended, leaving Sarah staring at the blank screen. In 3 years at the Academy, she had never received official communication from Earth's government. She was here as a cultural exchange student, nothing more. Or so everyone believed. Sarah quickly changed into her formal Academy uniform and made her way across campus to the communication facility. The building was heavily shielded and monitored, designed to prevent any form of espionage or unauthorized surveillance. Students rarely had reason to use it, since most interstellar communication was handled through the Academy's standard networks. The duty officer, a young Krillian barely out of adolescence, checked Sarah's authorization code and directed her to a private booth in the facility's most secure section. As she settled into the communication chair, Sarah found herself wondering what could be important enough for Admiral Webb to contact her directly through military channels. The holographic projector activated, and Admiral Webb's image appeared with startling clarity. Behind him, Sarah could see the familiar backdrop of ISD headquarters on Earth, but there were other figures moving in the shadows, people she couldn't quite make out. "Sarah," the Admiral began without preamble, "how much do you know about Kethvar the Destroyer?" Sarah's blood went cold. Every student at the Academy knew that name, though most had only heard whispered stories. Kethvar was the galaxy's most wanted criminal, a being so dangerous that even the Academy's best chasers had refused contracts to pursue him. "I know the basic facts," Sarah replied carefully. Kethvar is responsible for the destruction of at least 12 inhabited worlds, the assassination of 7 galactic leaders, and the theft of weapons technology that could theoretically destroy entire star systems. He's been operating for over 50 standard years, and no chaser has ever been able to track him for more than a few weeks before losing the trail. Admiral Webb nodded grimly. "That's the public information. What you don't know is that 6 months ago, Kethvar acquired something from a secret Earth research facility. Something that makes all his previous crimes look like minor theft." Sarah leaned forward in her chair. What did he take? The complete genetic database of every human in the Terran colonies, along with psychological profiles and cultural analysis going back 3 generations. Sarah, he has enough information to predict and manipulate human behavior on a species-wide scale. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. With that kind of data, Kethvar could orchestrate the complete destruction of human civilization without ever setting foot near a human world. He could manipulate markets, governments, and military forces simply by understanding how humans would react to specific stimuli. "Why are you telling me this?" Sarah asked, though she was beginning to suspect she already knew the answer. Admiral Webb's expression grew even more serious. "Because Sarah, everyone thinks you're just a quiet student who's managed to avoid attention for 3 years. They don't know that you've been building the most comprehensive database of criminal psychology and chaser methodology in galactic history. They don't know that you've identified weaknesses in the Academy's approach that no one else has even noticed." Sarah felt her heart racing. "How do you know about my research?" "Because Sarah, you're not here as a cultural exchange student. You never were." Admiral Webb activated a secondary display showing Sarah's real personnel file. "You're here as Earth's first candidate for the most dangerous mission in human history. We need someone to hunt down Kethvar the Destroyer, and you're the only human alive who might be able to do it." The room seemed to spin around Sarah as the full weight of the Admiral's words hit her. Everything she had thought about her time at the Academy, everything she had believed about her purpose here, had been a carefully constructed lie. "You've been preparing me for this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've been hoping we would never need you," Admiral Webb corrected. "But, Sarah, Kethvar has made his first move. 3 days ago, the colony world of New Geneva went dark. 2 million humans, just gone. No distress signal, no evidence of attack, no trace of what happened to them." Sarah closed her eyes and tried to process this information. New Geneva was one of humanity's most successful colonies, a thriving world with advanced defenses and early warning systems. For it to simply disappear without a trace suggested something far worse than conventional warfare. "When do I leave?" she asked. Admiral Webb smiled for the first time since the conversation had begun. "That's the Sarah Chun we've been counting on. But, first, you need to complete your final Academy examination. Graduate with full honors, get your official Chaser certification, and make everyone believe you're just another successful student. And then? Then, you begin the most important hunt in human history. Sarah, Kethvar the Destroyer has been operating freely for 50 years because he's smarter, faster, and more ruthless than anyone who's tried to catch him. But he's never been hunted by a human." Admiral Webb leaned closer to the camera, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "He's never been hunted by someone who spent 3 years learning every weakness, every blind spot, and every failure in the galaxy's greatest hunting tradition. Sarah, you're not just going to be a chaser. You're going to be something the galaxy has never seen before." The transmission ended, leaving Sarah alone in the secure booth with the weight of 2 million missing human lives on her shoulders and the knowledge that everything she had worked for over the past 3 years had been leading to this moment. She sat in silence for several minutes, processing the magnitude of what she had just learned. Then, with the same methodical precision she had applied to her studies, Sarah began planning her next moves. First, she would complete her final examinations and graduate from the Academy with perfect scores. Then, she would begin the hunt for the most dangerous criminal in galactic history. And Kethvar the Destroyer would learn what it meant to be pursued by someone who had spent 3 years studying not just how to hunt, but how the galaxy's greatest hunters failed. The quiet student in the back of the classroom was about to become the most dangerous predator in known space. 3 weeks after Admiral Webb's revelation, Sarah stood before the Academy's final examination board, her hands steady despite the magnitude of what lay ahead. The examination chamber was a massive amphitheater carved from single piece of crystallized obsidian, its walls lined with the portraits of legendary chasers from across galactic history. Their painted eyes seemed to watch her every movement as she prepared for the most important test of her academic career. The examination board consisted of 5 of the Academy's most distinguished faculty members, each representing a different approach to the art of pursuit. Professor Vexthera sat at the center, his golden eyes reflecting centuries of successful hunts. To his left, Master Huntress Zilandra of the Void Stalkers, whose ethereal form seemed to phase in and out of visibility. On the right, Commander Brudok, whose scarred hide bore testimony to countless dangerous encounters across the frontier worlds. Student Chen, Professor Vexthera's voice echoed through the chamber, you have maintained satisfactory academic performance throughout your tenure at the Academy. However, your practical applications have been limited. Sarah nodded respectfully. It was true that she had avoided most of the Academy's competitive simulations and field exercises. While her classmates had spent their time proving their prowess in mock hunts and tracking competitions, she had been conducting her own, very different kind of preparation. Today's examination will test not only your theoretical knowledge but your ability to apply Academy principles in real-world scenarios, continued Master Zilandra, her voice carrying the harmonic overtones common to her species. You will face a series of challenges designed to evaluate your readiness to become a certified chaser. The first challenge was deceptively simple. The examiners presented Sarah with a holographic crime scene from an actual case, one of the Academy's legendary successes from 2 centuries past. The criminal had been a shapeshifter capable of assuming any form, having used this ability to infiltrate and rob secure facilities across 17 different worlds. You have 30 minutes to analyze the evidence and propose a tracking strategy, Commander Brudok announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had personally brought down some of the galaxy's most dangerous fugitives. Sarah stepped closer to the holographic display, studying the recreated crime scene with the same methodical attention she had applied to her archival research. Her classmates would have immediately begun cataloging physical evidence, searching for DNA traces or energy signatures that might indicate the criminal's true species or point of origin. Instead, Sarah focused on what wasn't there. The shapeshifter had chosen to rob a Krillian merchant bank, but had done so during the Day of Scales, the most important religious holiday in Krillian culture. Every other criminal in the Academy's files who had targeted Krillian institutions had specifically avoided religious periods, recognizing that security would be heightened and investigations would be pursued with greater intensity. This suggested either remarkable ignorance of Krillian culture, or a deliberate choice to operate when security forces would be emotionally compromised. Sarah studied the holographic timestamps more carefully, noting that the robbery had occurred exactly 17 minutes after the traditional ceremonial prayers would have ended. The criminal isn't a shapeshifter, Sarah announced, her voice carrying clearly through the examination chamber. The board members exchanged glances. Professor Vexthera leaned forward, his tail swishing with interest. Explain your reasoning. A shapeshifter capable of assuming any form wouldn't need to time their robbery so precisely. They could simply assume the appearance of authorized personnel and access the vault during normal operating hours. Sarah gestured to specific elements in the holographic display. The timing suggests someone who understood Krillian psychology well enough to know that security guards would be emotionally distracted immediately following religious observances, but not well enough to realize that this would actually increase their vigilance rather than decrease it. She paused, organizing her thoughts before continuing. The criminal is likely Krillian, probably someone with a personal grudge against this particular bank, who used stolen shape-shifting technology rather than natural ability. The 17-minute delay was calculated to avoid the actual ceremony, but the choice of day was emotional rather than strategic. Master Zilandra's form solidified more fully, indicating surprise. The official Academy analysis concluded that the criminal was a natural shapeshifter from the Helix systems. The official Academy analysis was incorrect, Sarah replied calmly. The criminal was captured 3 months later when they attempted to sell the stolen shapeshifting device back to its original manufacturer. A check of Krillian employment records would have revealed that the bank had fired a security consultant named Morgek approximately 6 months before the robbery, after he had raised concerns about vulnerabilities in their vault system. The examination board fell silent. Sarah had just contradicted one of the Academy's most celebrated case studies, and she had done so with a level of analytical precision that highlighted fundamental flaws in the accepted methodology. Commander Brudok activated his personal datapad and began cross-referencing Sarah's claims with archived records. After several minutes of rapid information retrieval, he looked up with an expression of grudging respect. Student records confirmed that a Krillian named Morgek was indeed captured attempting to sell illegal shape-shifting technology. The connection to the bank robbery was noted but not emphasized in the official reports. He deactivated his datapad and studied Sarah more intently. How did you identify information that was apparently overlooked by the original investigation team? I read the case files differently, Sarah replied. Most chasers focus on what the criminal did. I studied what they didn't do, what they avoided, and what their choices revealed about their psychological state and cultural background. The second challenge involved a tactical simulation, a holographic environment where Sarah would need to track and apprehend a dangerous fugitive across a variety of terrain types. Her classmates had trained extensively for such simulations, developing enhanced reflexes and specialized equipment techniques that would allow them to overcome physical obstacles and outmaneuver their targets. Sarah approached the simulation differently. Instead of immediately beginning pursuit when the fugitive's holographic form appeared at the far end of the simulated landscape, she spent several minutes studying the environment itself. The terrain included dense forests, rocky canyons, urban environments, and open plains, each presenting different advantages and challenges for both hunter and prey. Her target was a holographic representation of a Vorthan assassin, a species known for incredible speed and agility. Most Academy students would have attempted to match the Vorthan's mobility, using technological enhancements and athletic conditioning to keep pace across difficult terrain. Sarah identified a better approach. She moved to the urban environment and began systematically examining the infrastructure, looking for patterns in the architectural design and resource distribution. After 15 minutes of careful observation, she positioned herself at a specific intersection and simply waited. The examination board observed her apparent inactivity with growing concern. Students were expected to demonstrate aggressive pursuit techniques and physical prowess during tactical simulations. Sarah appeared to be doing nothing at all. 23 minutes into the simulation, the holographic Vorthan assassin appeared exactly where Sarah had predicted, moving at maximum speed through the intersection she had chosen. As the target passed her position, Sarah stepped forward and placed her hand on the hologram's shoulder, indicating successful apprehension according to simulation protocols. "Explain your strategy," Professor Vexthera demanded, his voice carrying a mixture of confusion and grudging admiration. "Vorthans are ambush predators in their natural environment," Sarah explained, her breathing still calm and controlled despite having just completed what should have been an intensive pursuit scenario. Their speed and agility evolved for short bursts of activity followed by long periods of patient observation. When forced to maintain high-speed movement over extended periods, they begin to develop predictable patterns. She gestured toward the holographic terrain display. The simulation environment was designed to force continuous movement through varied terrain types. A Vorthan maintaining maximum speed would need to conserve energy by choosing the most efficient routes between sections. By analyzing the topography and infrastructure, I could predict the 3 most likely paths the target would take. Sarah pointed to the intersection where she had waited. This location provided access to all 3 potential routes, and the urban environment offered sightlines that would allow early detection regardless of which path the target chose. Rather than exhausting myself in pursuit, I let the target's own psychological and physiological limitations bring them to me. The examination board exchanged looks that were difficult to interpret. Sarah's approach had been effective, but it challenged fundamental assumptions about how chasers should operate. The Academy trained hunters to be aggressive, relentless pursuers who wore down their targets through superior conditioning and determination. Sarah had demonstrated that superior analysis could achieve the same results with minimal physical effort. The third and final challenge was the most complex. Sarah was presented with a theoretical scenario involving the pursuit of an extremely dangerous criminal across multiple star systems, with limited resources and no backup support. She would need to develop a comprehensive strategy for locating, tracking, and apprehending a target who possessed advanced technology, significant financial resources, and detailed knowledge of Academy training methods. The scenario was based on a real case that had ended in failure 20 years earlier, though the examination board didn't inform Sarah of this fact. 3 different Academy chasers had attempted to apprehend the criminal in question, and all had been killed in the process. Sarah spent an hour analyzing the provided information, building detailed profiles of the criminal's psychology, capabilities, and likely strategies. As she worked, she began to recognize patterns that seemed familiar, details that reminded her of cases she had studied during her archival research. This criminal is still active, she announced suddenly, looking up from her analysis materials. The examination board stirred uneasily. Master Zelandra's form flickered with surprise. What makes you believe that? The psychological profile and operational methods match 17 other cases spanning the past 50 years. The Academy has been treating these as separate criminals, but the behavioral patterns, the choice of targets, and the escalation sequence are identical. Sarah stood and began pacing, her mind racing through connections and implications. You're not asking me to develop a theoretical strategy. You're asking me to solve a case that the Academy has been failing to solve for 5 decades. Professor Vexthera's claws clicked against the examination table. Even if your analysis is correct, how would you proceed? Sarah turned to face the board directly. I wouldn't. The silence that followed was deafening. In the Academy's history, no student had ever refused to attempt an examination challenge. Explain, Commander Brutuk growled, his scarred features darkening with displeasure. Every Academy approach to this criminal has failed because they've been treating the symptoms rather than the cause, Sarah replied, her voice gaining confidence as she organized her thoughts. You've been trying to catch someone who's always one step ahead because they understand Academy training methods better than Academy graduates understand them. She gestured toward the case materials. This criminal has been using Academy-trained chasers as unwitting research subjects, studying their methods and psychology through direct engagement. Each failed pursuit has provided them with more information about Academy capabilities and limitations. Sarah paused, meeting the gaze of each board member in turn. The only way to successfully apprehend this target would be to abandon Academy methods entirely and approach the problem from a completely different perspective. Which means the Academy's training has been preparing chasers to fail against this particular threat for 50 years. The examination chamber fell completely silent. Sarah had just suggested that the Academy's legendary methods were not only inadequate, but actively counterproductive when applied to certain types of criminal behavior. Professor Vexthera was the first to speak. Student Chen, your analysis is unconventional. However, your reasoning demonstrates a level of strategic thinking that goes beyond what we typically expect from Academy graduates. He activated a holographic display that showed Sarah's complete academic record. Your theoretical scores are among the highest in Academy history. Your practical applications, while unorthodox, have proven remarkably effective. And your ability to identify flaws in established methodologies suggests a level of analytical capability that could prove valuable in complex cases. The other board members nodded their agreement, though their expressions remained carefully neutral. It is the judgment of this board, Professor Vexthera continued, that you have demonstrated mastery of Academy principles while also developing innovative approaches that could expand the effectiveness of chaser methodology. You are hereby certified as a galactic chaser, with full privileges and responsibilities. Sarah bowed respectfully to the examination board, but inside she felt a mixture of satisfaction and apprehension. She had successfully completed her Academy training, but she knew that the real test was yet to come. That evening, as her classmates celebrated their graduation with traditional ceremonies and festivities, Sarah returned to her dormitory room to find Admiral Webb waiting for her. Congratulations, Chaser Chen, he said, emphasizing her new title. How do you feel about your first assignment? Sarah settled into her desk chair and looked at the man who had orchestrated 3 years of elaborate deception. I assume you were monitoring my examination? Every word. The board was quite impressed with your analysis of the theoretical scenario. They have no idea that the criminal in question is Kethvar the Destroyer, operating under one of his many assumed identities. The pieces suddenly clicked into place in Sarah's mind. The examination wasn't just a test of my capabilities. It was a way to get me thinking about Kethvar's methods without revealing his connection to the missing colony. Admiral Webb smiled grimly. Sarah, you've been studying Academy failures and limitations for 3 years. What you discovered today is that Kethvar has been studying the Academy just as intensively, but from the opposite perspective. He's been using their own methods against them. Which is why conventional Academy approaches won't work against him, Sarah concluded. Exactly. But, Sarah, you're not a conventional Academy graduate. You've developed analytical techniques that go beyond anything in the standard curriculum. You've identified weaknesses in chaser methodology that even the Academy's best instructors don't recognize. Admiral Webb activated a portable holographic projector, displaying a star chart that showed the locations of Kethvar's known activities over the past 50 years. We've been tracking him longer than anyone realizes. Every Academy failure, every dead chaser, every successful escape has been providing us with data about his capabilities and limitations. Sarah studied the star chart carefully, noting patterns in the distribution of incidents. You've been using Academy graduates as intelligence gatherers. They thought they were hunting Kethvar, but they were actually collecting information for Earth's military intelligence. A necessary sacrifice, Admiral Webb replied without emotion. Sarah, Kethvar the Destroyer possesses technology and knowledge that could end human civilization. The Academy chasers who died pursuing him gave their lives so that we could understand what we're really facing. The weight of that revelation settled heavily on Sarah's shoulders. Dozens of skilled hunters had died so that she could be prepared for this moment, their deaths contributing to a database of intelligence that would hopefully give her the edge she needed to succeed where they had failed. "When do I leave?" she asked. "Tomorrow. A ship is waiting for you at the Academy spaceport, officially registered as a private transport for a newly certified chaser beginning their first independent contract." Admiral Webb stood and moved toward the door. "Sarah, everything you've learned here, everything you've discovered about Academy limitations and criminal psychology, has been preparing you for the most dangerous hunt in galactic history." He paused at the threshold and turned back to face her. "But remember, you're not just representing Earth now. You're about to demonstrate to the entire galaxy what a human chaser is capable of accomplishing." After Admiral Webb left, Sarah spent the rest of the night reviewing her private notes and research materials. Tomorrow, she would begin tracking the most dangerous criminal in known space, armed with knowledge that no other hunter possessed and analytical techniques that had never been applied to a target of this caliber. As she prepared for sleep, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. 3 years ago, she had arrived at the Academy as an apparently unremarkable student from a backwater world. Tomorrow, she would leave as a certified chaser with the most comprehensive understanding of criminal psychology and hunting methodology in galactic history. But, more importantly, she would be carrying the hopes of 2 million missing humans and the responsibility of preventing Kethvar from using stolen Earth data to destroy human civilization. The quiet student in the back of the classroom was about to become the most dangerous hunter in the galaxy. And Kethvar the Destroyer, who had spent 50 years studying and defeating Academy-trained chasers, was about to face something completely new. He was about to be hunted by a human who understood his methods better than he understood theirs. The starship Persistence hung in the void between star systems, its sensors carefully scanning the debris field that had once been the colony world of New Geneva. Sarah stood on the bridge, studying the readouts with the same methodical attention she had once applied to ancient Academy archives. What she saw confirmed her worst fears about Kethvar's capabilities. "No energy signatures consistent with conventional weapons," reported Lieutenant Commander Torres, the ship's tactical officer. "No radiation patterns indicating nuclear or antimatter explosives. No gravitational distortions suggesting black hole weapons or dimensional warfare." Captain Morrison, a veteran of Earth's Deep Space Exploration Division, moved to stand beside Sarah at the sensor console. "In 40 years of military service, I've never seen anything like this. It's as if 2 million people and an entire planetary infrastructure simply ceased to exist." Sarah nodded grimly as she analyzed the data streams flowing across her personal display. New Geneva had been a thriving world just 6 days ago, with bustling cities, agricultural regions, and industrial centers that had made it one of humanity's most successful colonies. Now there was nothing but empty space and scattered molecular debris. The destruction was precise, she observed, highlighting specific sensor readings for the bridge crew. "Look at the debris patterns. The molecular composition is consistent with complete atomic disassembly, but only of biological and artificial materials. Natural geological formations, metal ores, and mineral deposits have been left untouched." Captain Morrison studied the highlighted data with growing unease. "You're saying whatever did this was selective? It targeted living beings and technology while preserving natural resources?" More than that, Sarah replied, her fingers dancing across the sensor controls to bring up additional analysis results. The pattern of destruction suggests intimate knowledge of human settlement planning and infrastructure design. Whoever did this knew exactly where to find every person, every building, and every piece of technology on New Geneva. The implications hung heavy in the air around them. The only way to achieve such precise targeting would be to possess detailed information about New Geneva's layout, population distribution, and defensive systems. Combined with the stolen Earth database, Kethvar had apparently been able to orchestrate the complete elimination of human presence while leaving the world's natural resources intact for future exploitation. "Captain," Sarah said, turning away from the sensor console, "I need to examine the debris field directly." "Can you deploy a shuttle with full analytical capabilities?" "Absolutely not," Captain Morrison replied immediately. "Sarah, whatever weapon was used here, there's no guarantee it won't activate again. I won't risk losing our only chance of tracking down whoever did this." Sarah had expected this reaction, but she had also prepared for it. During her 3 years at the academy, she had learned that successful hunters needed to think several steps ahead, anticipating obstacles and preparing alternative approaches. "Captain, I understand your concerns, but I'm not requesting a standard investigation approach." Sarah activated her personal holographic projector, displaying a detailed analysis of the debris field's current configuration. "Based on the molecular patterns and energy residue, I believe I can determine Kethvar's location and next target without entering the debris field directly." She gestured toward specific elements in the holographic display. The weapon that destroyed New Geneva required enormous amounts of energy and extremely precise targeting information. Both of those requirements create detectable signatures that persist long after the actual destruction event. Captain Morrison studied the display intently. As a military officer, he understood the importance of Sarah's mission, but he also understood the value of caution when dealing with unknown weapons technology. "What exactly are you looking for?" he asked. "Energy patterns that will tell us how long Kethvar spent preparing this attack, what kind of technology he used, and, most importantly, what limitations that technology might have." Sarah manipulated the holographic display to show projected energy flow patterns. Weapons capable of this level of precision